pleasure to introduce our first session, which will provide a foundational framing for why we are here, and which needs to remain central to all we do, no matter who you are in this room. So that is the conversation with the farmer. If we want to transform the food system, we need to talk to farmers. And if you want to fund the transition to a new food system, we need to talk to farmers. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Koen van Seijen to the stage. He's going to moderate a conversation not just with one farmer, but 4 farmers that we have here today. And we will have an opportunity for audience questions towards the end, so please save those questions and be ready to engage. So please welcome Koen, Dimitri, Benedikt, Anne, and Isabelle.
Thank you. Of course, we're going to mess with you. We're just going to sit slightly different, so I don't think it's too difficult to recognize. It gives me enormous pleasure to be here. I hear a slight echo. They're working with the sound. That's a good sound. It gives me enormous pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. I remember being at the first RFSI in 2019 in Oakland in a very small room, and we came a long way. So first of all, I'm Koen van Seijen. We have the great pleasure of hosting a podcast, interviewed many of you, and many others are still on the list. We have a lot of amazing people combining the world of finance and the world of soil on our virtual couch, and a number of them are here and have been on the podcast, or Isabelle is definitely going to be on the podcast. And when Sarah asked to kick it off, of course, there was no better way of doing that with amazing farmers, and just to ground us, which is also the title of this session. It's going to be a packed one. We have 4 amazing people that can all share for multiple hours, and we have 50 minutes, and we have 4, plus questions from you. So allow me to interrupt, be brief, and try to steer us on time, and we're going to do that with a brief introduction, which is already a tricky one. So I want to know, first of all, where you farm. I want to know if you were born on a farm or not, what you farm and where you sell, meaning global, regional, on the farm, etc., and if you have raised outside capital. And we're going to go just from my left, basically. So Benedikt, kick it off and keep it brief.
Sure. Well, I was raised on a farm. Our farm specializes on arable land, livestock, agroforestry. We have a tree nursery, and we sell parts of to customers through our online shop, and much of the grain is going to the wholesale ecological traders. And we raised outside capital through our foundation. We raised some foundation capital as well as some governmental grants, and within the commercial businesses we also have some commercial corporations.
Okay, that was too brief. Where do you farm? And how big?
I thought I forgot something. So I farm an hour east of Berlin, in one of the driest and sandiest regions in Germany, and our farm is 3,000 hectares, 1,000 hectares of arable land and 2,000 hectares of forestry.
Super. And if you want to know more, it's a bit of a dramatic version, but you are also the star of a Disney Plus series.
Not sure if I'm the star, but
definitely are. Anne?
Great, yeah. My farm is called Bodemzicht. Google still translates it as bottom view, but it's meant to be soil perspective, just to get that clear.
Soil perspective, we go for that.
It's a small farm, but actually I'm in a very strange situation of moving farms, and I never intended to move my farm, and it hurts a lot, but it also shows me and makes me feel how much I feel that connection actually again to place. So it's a 5-hectare farm. Thanks for getting rid of the... It's and now a 5-hectare farm, but it will be a 45-hectare farm in the east of the Netherlands. And we have an intensive no-dig market garden, agroforestry system. We will start also with a tree nursery, chickens in egg mobiles, holistically planned grazing around the place. And we will also start with some cows in the new place. And we direct market. Until now, we've direct marketed everything within 8 kilometers from the farm. So to households and chefs. That was all within a very small circle, but now that we're going to scale up a little bit, we're also going to work more with food processing. And the farm has always been a place which was not only a commercial farm, but it was also a foundation, a learning place for people to actually experience what it means, regenerative agriculture, to come and visit the place, but also one of the most beautiful things we've grown are farmers and not carrots. So that was always part of the plan. We've raised outside capital for sure. We started actually off our farm, that was 5 years ago, with Ecosia. We won a prize in the Ecosia competition. Then we got some
with Richard Perkins, right?
With Richard Perkins, yeah. And then we got some private investment. We crowdfunded the chicken mobiles. So that's also something we did, and family funds have been supporting us also with the foundation. So,
and two things you mentioned: you supply the best vegetarian restaurant in the world with its veggies.
Yes.
So that's where the flavor comes from, and I think it's the first time you might have heard holistic plant grazing with layers, so with chickens and poultry. So that's possible.
Yeah.
Isabelle?
I wasn't born on a farm, and I farm here in Belgium. On 30 hectares, and I'm taking over 100 additional hectares in the 10 coming years. We grow organic fodders and bread wheat in combined crops. We've been working without tillage for the past 4 years and applying an agroforestry system with productive fruit trees and shrubs. And we'd like to expand that even more in the coming years. We sell everything in a radius of 5 kilometers from the farm, and then there's also transformed products on the farm that are sold at the farm directly. And I haven't raised any outside capital yet.
Ooh, suspense.
Nice. So I'm Dimitri, and we have a farm in Greece called Mazi Farm that I started in 2017 with my family. So we grow, it's basically a diversified fruit farm, growing pistachios, almonds, figs and pomegranates. We are located in a very degraded piece of land in southern Greece, so on a Greek island. And the objective when we started the farm was to understand how regenerative agriculture could kind of deal with some of these challenges as Greece is facing at the moment, such as desertification. And that's maybe one of the reasons why we're not going to grow like you guys. We're going to stick to 5 hectares at the moment, because it is quite a challenging environment and context. But it does allow us to produce some really nice high quality produce, and we're selling those mostly in France and in Switzerland directly, so within our networks over there. We have not raised any outside capital, and we don't plan on doing that for the moment. But the story gets a bit more complex from here. Basically, I stayed on the farm with my family for about 3 years, and after that I moved out of the farm and I went traveling because we identified a lot of challenges there that I needed to find answers to. And so I left the farm, went traveling, working on different farms, went back to study. And during that time I realized that my role was not going to be working on the farm operationally, but it was going to be more understanding how we're going to scale regenerative agriculture, focusing on the Mediterranean tree crop context. So after that, I basically started working with a company called Propagate, focusing on the economics, understanding that the economics was a key part of this transition, modeling a variety of crops, looking at how we're going to transition them towards regenerative. And after that, soon after, I created a company called Agrosystemi, and we're currently based and located mostly in Portugal, which is the other side of Europe, and working with a variety of farmers there to try and understand how we can kind of unblock some of these barriers that are preventing the farmers from transitioning. And actually one of the farmers is here with us. So yeah, João over there at the back. So yeah, we're working with some amazing farmers and working with them, building some solutions, building projects on their farms. So yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to know more about the numbers behind agroforestry, the Excel and all of that, plus actually some very innovative olive work you're doing in
Yes,
Portugal.
yeah, exactly.
Go and find Dimitri afterwards, or ask a question during the Q&A. But I would love to hear from all of you, and we can just do the reverse order now. If there's one thing, I mean, people are going to be bombarded with information today and tomorrow, and if there's one thing you would like to, already that they write down in their notebooks or write down on your computer, wherever you take your notes, one thing you remember, like, okay, that actually really stuck with me, and it was even in the first session, so you got your money worth already now. What would that be from a farmer's perspective, from your experience literally on the ground? What's the one seed we would like to plant, or the one thing we would like this room to remember when they walk out tomorrow afternoon? Start
with me.
Reverse order.
So I think that it's quite a general question here, but I think that one of the things I'd like everybody here to remember is, you know, from my experience working in the Mediterranean climate here and working with tree crops, we've often had this impression in the regen ag space that we have the knowledge and we have a strong understanding as to how we're going to be applying regenerative agriculture. One of the things that I've experienced working with different farmers and on our farming in Greece is that that knowledge is not necessarily always available, because regenerative agriculture or agriculture is a very context-specific sector. So within each area or each geography and within each crop type, we have different, problematics, different constraints, different issues. The farmers are facing different problems and are ingrained in different systems as well that are organized in different ways. And so we need to think about regenerative agriculture within these kind of these silos of geographies and crop types. And what's happening and what we've identified in the tree crop space is that the knowledge is not necessarily easily available. It's very sparse. Very few people have it. And so farmers are struggling to understand how they are going to be doing regenerative agriculture without, completely challenging and changing their systems. And so one of the things that we've been working on at the moment, having identified this and understood this, is creating this knowledge, and it's kind of a basic thing. I felt like in the regen ag space in the past, we were saying, okay, we don't need to have any more demonstration sites. We don't need to have any more research and development projects. We kind of know what's going on. We just need to go forward and scale. And I think that can be true for with certain crops in certain areas and geographies that may be more advanced in their regenerative journey. But that definitely is not the case yet in tree crops. So we've got to start with the basics there and start to develop this knowledge and develop projects to show farmers how it's done, so they can see, we can show data, they can see how it works in the field, and then that is the basis on which we can start to scale out and have a bigger impact.
We definitely we don't have all the recipes yet to just put in a few billion and scale. So be aware if somebody's selling that. Ask a few questions if the recipes are there. And I see Benedikt nodding a lot. We'll get to you. I think you have a different answer, but still. You are definitely on the recipe-seeking side as well. Isabelle?
I think an important point here, especially as talking with investors, is that farmers need to get the resources to be able to measure the added value that they bring in regenerative farming, in addition to the financial return. There's many things that can be measured, such as the health of the soil, the increase in biodiversity, the prevention of water pollution. Those are all things that can be measured. In Belgium, we're really lucky to have many universities on a very small territory that does those kind of measurements, but I think a lot of farmers need more help with that. And as investors, I think you need to be on the lookout for those measurements, because this added value has to be an integral part of the investment.
And you said something interesting also in the pre-call we had, like, very briefly. How was your transition to the regenerative transition? I think you said it was pretty easy, actually, because of the support.
Because of the support in Belgium. Maybe it's because it's such a densely populated country, so small. I'm in Flanders, so in the northern part of Belgium, and there's many foundations, but also public organizations and universities that constantly help us for free, provide advice, measure the work that we do, and put us in touch with other farmers that are willing to work in similar ways. So yeah, I think the support in Belgium is tremendous.
It's always also good to hear. Like, some places there's support for transitions. And Anna, what would be your main message you would like people to remember from these days?
Ooh. I think my main message would also connect to what it actually entails, regeneration. I see like a lot of people are focused on practices, but regeneration is a process. It's an outcome-based process, and just like Dimitri said, it's like specific in every place, in every context, it's a different thing. And what I see is there's a lot of tendency to sort of standardize regenerative agriculture or to make a standardized model. And I mean, we are all super good and super trained in linear thinking, in dealing with complicated stuff, but we're very inexperienced, I say, from a Western perspective, and especially a Dutch person, in complex. We're very bad at complex. We just don't know how to work with complex systems. And ecosystems, life, which is what regeneration is all about, life is complex. So how do we lean into that process of life unfolding? And how do we find our ways to make that sort of workable in a complicated system that doesn't do damage to the beautiful process that life actually is, and the beautiful process of regeneration that is different in every specific place? And how do we support all these brave, amazing farmers that actually put their necks out to make it work in their context? That, I think, should be the core question of this conference.
And all these farmers that take all the risks and often none or very little of the rewards. May I add there? Benedikt, how do you go after this?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree to everything that has been said, and I had an interesting experience. Last week, Wednesday, I was invited to give a speech or a presentation at a farmers' convention. It was like 300 farmers in the room, hardcore, conventional, potatoes and pigs, and like really going for it. I think the average age was about 60. And on the way
how
there...
did you open? What did you do there?
Well, I made a joke about myself. I won't get into it too much. But on the way there, I drove through, it's in Niedersachsen, so it's an area with pretty good soil, a lot of rain, and highly productive. And usually I don't get nervous anymore doing speeches or something. I've overcome that. It was really terrible when I was younger, but and I was driving there, and all the fields were flooded. As far as my eye could see, all the fields were flooded. I could see the potatoes haven't been harvested in autumn. I could see they weren't able to plant new products in the autumn. And whenever I looked at it, I got really, really nervous. And I was thinking, why am I getting nervous? Like, I don't have that anymore. And I realized that the reason why I got so nervous is because I felt the gratitude about what we are actually talking about. We're talking about farmers' existence. We're talking about the life of these people who put everything into that, what they're doing with all the passion, all the risk, everything they bring to the table, 24/7. And I think that, that would be my message also to people who invest in the space. This is not an investment trend. This is not a hype. This is probably the last chance that we have. And I think as far as investors is concerned, if if you do it because you think it's just economically viable and really interesting, you're probably not doing the right thing. You have to have a deep connection within the topic and the potential and understand that it's not just about economically scaling. It is about all these things that you also describe. It's a cultural shift, and I think that is something that you need to bring to the table, because it will get more difficult, and in order to overcome that, you have to be completely in it with everything you have.
So you suggested to grow rice for them, or what was your opening? How's the risotto coming along?
Well, I told them, I can't solve their problems, and really no one can. And I mean, you heard it here. It's just the complexity. It's the regional difference. It's the really not knowing what to do. Everyone has to start small. Everyone has to learn on a small scale, and then slowly but surely grow it on your farm. And the challenges that are coming are incredible. But at the same time, and that I think is what connected me to them, is the beauty of it. It's the clear potential of it. It's everything that we live and fight for, which is just insane. Nature has the ability to regenerate in such an incredibly fast time. And I think that is what we have to focus on. We have to stop being afraid. I think that is what is holding us back many times, and just get on with it, I guess.
And did you see, because of the, let's say, weather hardship they've seen or they are experiencing for the last couple of years, especially this one, was there an openness or an interest, or because I think we've heard many stories of farmers transitioning mainly because they had to. There are very few that are looking far ahead. I mean, there are few here in the room, but many because they run out of money. I mean, we've heard the famous stories of Gabe Brown, etc. Like, did you see that there was a willingness and interest? Was that because did you see another an interest to new things because they've been pushed so far?
Well, I think definitely there is, but I think the reality is that us people here in the room, we are in that bubble of regenerative, and we already see that beautiful future, which probably will come in some time. But the reality of most farmers is a very different one. We are not classical farmers, quite the opposite.
If you haven't seen it yet, this is not the classical age, nor the classical, let's say, mindset plus farm.
Yeah. If you ask a farmer today, probably 80% of them will talk about not being able to plan for the future because of unsure political directions. They'll talk about bureaucracy. They'll talk about having no one to take over the farm. These are different problems than what we are talking about. And having also grown up in a system that you actually live through the different technological developments, be it seed coating, be it fertilizer, be it machines, those things always came with a bit easier work. They came with a bit higher profit potential. And because of that, many don't have the ability, because they grew up with it and in it, to look from the meta level and say, oh, wow, all these developments led me to be incredibly dependent. It gave me basically the possibility to focus on one product and specialize, but now I can't do anything anymore, right? And so I think we have to be kind of careful that we don't push this train of regenerative is the answer to everything too far ahead, because if the farmers can't keep up with it, we'll lose them, and we can't afford to do that.
And then before we go to a few questions from you all here, what's the biggest myth you all would like to the biggest bubble you'd like to pop, or the biggest demystify question? Like, if you have people visiting on the farm, you go and give speeches, or maybe not in this bubble here, but the biggest myth around regenerative agriculture and food, what would that myth be? Whoever wants to go first, let's do popcorn style. Maybe not you, Benedikt. It's okay.
I'll take this up because I think it's quite well connected to what you were saying, Benedikt. I think that farmers, we have this idea that a farmer needs to go through this regenerative transition on his or her own, and needs to, because we see a lot of pioneer farmers in the regen ag space that have just broken away from the norm and just developed their own systems and innovated on the farm and set up their own trials and have gone through, actually, many times when you look at the stories, a lot of hardship doing it. And so we need to understand that the farmer is part of a system currently. So, for example, farmers are part of cooperatives. The cooperatives sell fertilizers, provide agronomists that will advise them. It's a very systemic issue. And they're part of these systems that connect them to the current farming reality. And so we really need to understand this farming reality and how they're connected to these different elements if we want to change this, if we want to come in and create any regenerative transition. And especially we need to understand that the farmer cannot take all these decisions and cannot create all this innovation on his or her own and needs support. So we need to be not just, if we're thinking about financing, for example, and funding, and I know that many people are very aware of this, but we can't just be looking at financing the farmer or financing the farm itself. We need to be looking at financing projects or businesses or systems that support the farmer to replace these older systems which are not really benefiting the farmer completely. They can at some times, but in many times there are issues with the supporting system which isn't really looking at the farmer's business welfare in the medium and long term. So I think that's really important to keep in mind and to understand that the farm is kind of being pulled in every direction and are connected in many different directions. And if we don't deal with this, then we're not going to really be effectively bringing regeneration at scale. And I think you'll notice by now I'm always thinking about how we can bring this regeneration at scale. I think this is the big topic at the moment. So yeah, I think this is a big one.
I think the answer to feeding the planet,
which is a question we got thrown out a lot. Like, okay, this is all great, but how are you going to feed the world? How are you going to feed everyone? Yeah, please give us the answer.
It doesn't have to be with mega farms, especially in relatively densely populated areas. I believe that we farmers can be incentivized to produce locally consumed products if we're able to control and manage integrated grocery shops that combine basic necessities with our productions. And if this model can be multiplied enough, models like your farm, I think we really, can change our food system.
And you're experimenting with that, right?
Yes, I'm hoping to build an open source blueprint for that type of farm that could be duplicated widely.
So it's repeat, not necessarily scale.
Yes, multiply, not scale.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think one of the biggest myths that's actually a huge barrier for regenerative agriculture to really come off the ground is our worldview, basically. So I get so many people at the farm that thinks it's either nature or production. So it's either biodiversity or it's agriculture. And it cannot be both. In our heads, we created a world in which we really think that it should always be either or. And that puts you as a human being in a very sorrowful position in which actually you can only do damage to the rest of life. But it doesn't work like that. So we need to get rid of this idea that it's always either or and start to ask the question, hey, how could we actually co-design these beautiful places with the rest of life and make it an end-to-end farm? And I think the beauty is when you go and visit, so please go and visit regenerative farms, you will also feel and experience that immediately. It's not an either or, it is an end-to-end. And you can have a place thriving with life that also produces a lot of food that is actually super nutrient dense. So please get that barrier out of your heads and embrace the idea that there might be more possible.
And there's a lot of research actually coming out now backing that up, but it's a big one. Like many people in the biodiversity space can't imagine biodiversity could be more on a productive land than on some nearby nature area, or if you fence it off, then it will be fine, or something like that. There's a role for us to play as a beneficial keystone species, as some people here like to say it. So. But it's a huge paradigm shift, I think, in thinking. So let's let that sink in and see how we can help with that, because a lot of people outside this room are not there yet. So let's invite them there. Benedikt, you get a lot of people on the farm. What is the biggest myth, demystify piece you like to, you start to...
Well, we have Berlin very close, so we have very many vegans coming and vegetarians. And I think I will raise that point, to be honest with you, because it is just very close to my heart, and I think it is also incredibly important. So to start our transition in early 2019, I sold my German Audi A4 in order to buy the first cows, and I always say I swapped 200 horsepower for 20 cow powers, because I had no other way of financing that. And that has grown now to about 200 cows that we holistically include in the crop rotation of our arable farming, from summer pastures where we have a rotation of 2 to 4 times per day towards the winter pasture where they use cover crops and the undersown crops of the fields. And back in the day, we spent between 80 and 120,000 euros just for nutrients to get on the farm. They were brought with trucks from 400 kilometers away, then they were dumped on a certain spot, then they were lying there for a while, then we came there with a manure sprayer, we came there with a JCB to put it on there, and then we drove through the field up and down and just causing compaction and spraying it in the air. Half of it went into the air, the other half into the groundwater, and it was just made no sense. And I think now that we have the cows, we are more or less, not 100% yet, but we're more or less able to close our own nutrient cycle. Using the cows and using cows to increase photosynthetic capacity, water uptake, water storage facility, is just the most amazing and the most fastest, bestest way to build soil, to build biodiversity, to have an influence on the water cycle. It makes us much more independent, not only because we don't have to buy and rely on fertilizer brought in from the outside, but also economically, because we have nearly half a million of euros standing there as a value. So if I have a liquidity problem because there is some bad droughts or whatever, I can always rely back to the cows and maybe sell some 30 cows to just cover some of the costs that I have. So it gives me also economic diversification and independence, and that is exactly what we need. We need independent farmers that are able to adapt to changing climate, because the problem about the future and climate change is not that everything is always going to be more dry or everything is going to get wetter. It is the unpredictability of the weather, and that always means independence for farmers and flexibility and able to react. And so, I just really want to highlight the importance of the cows in the agricultural system. There is no other and no better solution than integrating cows into farming, into producing food, and not creating a competition between cows' food and people's food, but have them eat what they're supposed to eat. They are the biggest solution that we have, and so I guess with regards to people that have capital, if you have capital, you carry responsibility. If you finance firms that maybe have an interest in producing highly processed meat alternatives, I mean, that can be a part of the future if you like that. But if you build a narrative...
We're very diplomatic here, because in the pre-call you said something very different, but that can be part of the future if you like it.
You have to give more detail.
Try again.
I guess you know what I mean. But, I am okay with that, and no one of us is able to look into the future, and we will need the most diverse range of solutions for the future. But if you frame a narrative around animal farming or cows more specifically, that makes the cow the problem, you're not aware of the responsibility that you have with regards to the future of agriculture and land use. Because the cows are not the problem, it's the way we hold them. If we, of course, feed them things that we can eat ourselves, that is just stupid, and cows should be treated like humanely, or cowly, I guess. So there's so much wrong about the animal system that we know, 100%, I'm absolutely with that. But don't make the cow the enemy. We need cows on farms, we need cows on the land doing what they do best, and farmers need cows. So I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I saw some virtual fencing coming onto the farm recently with some interesting colors. And for anybody who didn't see the Disney Plus series yet, I'm not saying you should, but the first few episodes, let's say you position the animal as part of the farm pretty strongly. So it's also, but how does that land with, let's say, the vegan, I'm not saying fundamentalist, but pretty much from Berlin that still wants to visit and visits you? Like, how do you see that reaction when they come?
Well, I mean, they don't believe their eyes. They are deeply emotionally touched by how we interact with the cows, how much love we have for the cows, how deeply we live together. My girlfriend always says she wishes I would love our kids and her as much as I love the cows. I raise them, I am with them. Our whole focus is on making their lives as beautiful and as best as it can possibly be. And that includes me shooting them on the pasture where they stand every day without any stress, with a great deal of respect.
Which is on video if you want to see one of the episodes. It's intense, but it's very well done.
And it's similar to what Dimitri, you said about the farmers. We still have huge knowledge problems, and that's why I'm also mentioned that narrative part, because we use, we all live in our own truth, specifically in marketing. We just want to sell a product. No one really cares if it's true or not. So that means we have so many things filled up with misinformation that is just wrong. And if you explain people and let them emotionally feel and touch and smell what the truth is of what you're doing in this regard with the cows, you actually explain what really happens and what is really important. And so, many people who eat vegan they are like, wow, this is amazing. In this case, I would eat meat, right? So, I always try to be as honest and as open as I can be, and I always invite people to be also critical towards me, to find a good level of communication. And I have never, ever heard anything sort of negative. Everyone was always open and was always interested and was always giving me the doubt that I might be right. And I try to do that also. But it's more difficult than one may think.
I remember one guest on the show, on the podcast, said ex-vegans are his best customers. He raises animals as well, because they make a very conscious decision and are looking for, and many, because of health reasons, etc., come back to animal protein, and they're the ones that make the most conscious decision, because that's why they're there.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, I'm grateful for the, let's say, vegan movement, if you want to call it, or vegetarian, because that has obviously gotten a lot of attention for different reasons. But what we need is obviously farming to change, but it's also the big systems to change, and that can only be facilitated through society. We need society to fall back in love with nature, to understand the value of food, and so the vegan movement shows that it actually is possible. We get people to think about what they eat and
to change behavior,
yeah, exactly.
Which is the most difficult thing to do. With that, we're going to transition to a few questions from the audience. So we have time for a few. We have mics going around. So please. Oh. Sorry, go ahead. And we have questions from online as well. You can scan and send your question as well directly to Sarah. So then you get up in the queue.
Thank you. Using the front row advantage here. I'm Jochen Hauf. I'm from BayWa Renewable Energies. So I'm new in this bubble. I'm 30 years
Welcome.
renewable energy bubble. And my question is a little bit talking when hearing Anne about, the problem of linearity and you wanting to scale up. And Benedikt, you haven't mentioned that you are a banker, by training as well. So probably a non-linear banker, but most bankers think pretty linearly. And we in renewables, basically the way we scaled what you want was to make it investable, right? And find that common ground with the investment scene. And at the beginning, everybody was laughing too, or not getting it. So my question is, I guess, how can renewable energy help bridge some of the challenges in regen? Add an element of linearity maybe, or put differently, a little bit of free cash flow early on while the agroforest grows and doesn't generate anything yet. And I have now listened to your podcast up and down. I didn't find much, apart from Jeremy Leggett, that's a bit, but there is almost nothing in the regen bubble where they say, okay, we combine this, we use solar, we use wind, we use something else, we piggyback on that, and we use this to finance our agricultural transition. I don't know whether I just didn't see it or whether there is a threat somewhere. Please.
Renewable energy, the role. I mean, there's two roles for the renewable energy people moving into this space. I think there's a lot of experience that we need to make it bankable, investable, but also for renewable energy on site or in, because that is investable. Have you seen any, let's say, well-done integration instead of solar fields with nothing underneath being sprayed? Yeah. Who wants to take this one?
Have you heard of agrivoltaics?
Yeah.
Yeah, so integrating, I'm not sure exactly what the question was, but definitely there's some farmers that are, and some science is coming out where they're putting photovoltaic panels integrated with, for example, I've seen it with tree crops actually. So you've got apples underneath, and on top you've got these agrivoltaics, and what's interesting there is that it actually generates income for the farmers straight up, right, from the first year, instead of doing, for example, agroforestry, which usually you have to wait a certain amount of time for it to start cash flowing. Yeah, so but I'd love to have a conversation with you about how actually the renewable sector can help us to be more scalable, because clearly we talked about complexity today, so these systems are extremely complex, but if we're thinking about scaling, we have to somehow simplify things to a certain extent. We're lacking people at the moment that can go out and can spread this knowledge, for example, agronomists that can go out and consult, etc. And so for us to train rapidly these agronomists to meet the demand that's coming and that's already here, we're going to need to somehow also simplify these trainings. We can't have the current agronomists that we have now that have got 20, 30 years of experience in the space and that are super knowledgeable. We don't have 20, 30 years to wait. So yeah, I really enjoy this thing of, there's complexity, but somehow we have to simplify to a certain extent. What's the right balance? We need to work it out.
Yeah, and I think also for example, in the Netherlands, there are a lot of also large-scale farmers, and if you can use it as a transition, as a means of transition, right? So you can use your roofs as a means of transition to actually finance, because if you're in the current situation as a farmer, you have a debt, you have a single-use infrastructure that is pretty inflexible, and you want to change your business model, that's almost an impossibility, because you don't have any space to move, let alone to have this creative moment of rethinking your business. It's just not going to happen if you have too much stress financially and too much pressure. Well, Benedikt was also referring to that. So it might be a means also to facilitate the transition, I can imagine. But I think even before that, we should ask the question, what is the best renewable energy we have? And it's actually photosynthetic activity. So before you put down solar panels everywhere, let's try to first ask the question, how can we maximize the photosynthetic activity in this place? And then it's a nice addition or means or transition. Yeah.
Few. Let's go into the room. I don't know where the mics
Tom,
are.
did you? Yeah.
There.
Hi, my name is Erin, and this is Daniel. We're from Woodland Grow. And what we have come up with is the means to reduce synthetic fertilizer by using a living soil. And my question to the panel is, because we all know that microbes are so critical, do you think that it is right that we are not coming up with a statement for regenerative agriculture that absolutely forbids putting elements like glyphosate and other types of synthetics and pesticides and herbicides on those very microbes that we're trying to grow? It seems to be completely counterintuitive.
40 minutes in and we're at the definition. That took a while, actually. It was good, yeah. So who wants to tackle the... I mean, you're an organic farmer. I have an opinion to it. Yeah, you have an opinion.
Well, let's say if we look 50 years in the future, then I would say yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we shouldn't. Right now, that would be the worst thing that we can possibly do. Because we have to think about scale, right? Not necessarily in the first step scaling regenerative methods. That is already quite far ahead. We have to look at large-scale agriculture. The production of food for animal farming is a good example. And these huge systems need to change. Just as much some little farms have to diversify. But if we don't look at the large scale, and if we don't find solutions to change large scale, the impact will always just be limited. So that, and then on the other side, farming is so complex, and the regional context and the ecosystem can be so complex that in some farming situations you will need sometimes a herbicide or a fungicide, or you will need some fertilizer. And that is also okay, as long as that is not your go-to solution to overcome nature's response. If you have a large and a diversified crop rotation, it's absolutely okay if sometimes you have some fungi, you spray something. It's not that bad. It's just the ignoring nature at all and having, I don't know, three crops in a crop rotation that is destroying soil and biodiversity. There's great conventional farmers that use those tools. They are tools that build soil and that build biodiversity. And I think it's the biggest mistake if we shut the door on their change and their possibility to follow a lead where we all want to go, which possibly in 50 years is without synthetics.
I just wanted to ask something quickly. Did you say banning? At some point, banning these chemicals or banning their use in a regenerative system?
What I do is I use microscopy to actually look at the physical soil.
Yeah.
So when I am looking at a soil, I know right off the bat if somebody's been using synthetics because the soil's dead. And it's not a question. Glyphosate is actually patented as an antibiotic. So you can look at a healthy soil, and baselines of healthy soils are extremely difficult to find. Or you can look at a soil like glyphosate that's been where glyphosate has been used, and it's night and day. So when you say that there's no difference and there's still life, the life that is in a soil that's been treated with these synthetics is just so minimally bacterial. It lacks the diversity, it lacks the actual numbers, which means then you don't have the soil cycling of nutrients that you need if you want to create a regenerative system. So every single time that you're using it, like tillage, you're killing the microbes in the soil, which is why, to me, it's counterintuitive to... So yes, I would be banning it. We have a product that can replace it.
The problem with banning is, we need to think about what's going on right now in Europe with the farmers, protests. And they're under so much pressure. If you come up and we start banning, on top of that, more of the tools they currently need to make a profit in the short term, right now, they need these tools because that's what they have, that's what they know. We're adding too much pressure onto them. And it's not the direction we want to go to ban. I completely agree with what you're saying about the benefits for microbiology and for the soil cycling, etc. It's just we need to adopt another way to help these farmers transition out of these systems. By firstly, we need to develop the solutions. So I can tell you specifically in tree crops, it's hard to find alternatives. There are some. We need to test them. We need to apply them. We need to measure. If we replace the glyphosate with another living mulch, for example, is it going to compete with the tree? What's the impact on the economics? So we need to answer these questions, and then we need to help the farmers to transition out of this, because I can guarantee to you there's no farmer that likes applying glyphosate. Nobody likes to spray. No farmer likes to spray. It's something they dislike to do.
Dimitri,
so we shouldn't ban too much. Go help them out.
Let's bring that to the coffee break after. We have one short question and a short answer, and then we need a quick round before we wrap up because we want to finish on time. So please go ahead.
Okay,
No pressure.
Yeah. Just to add on to it, I agree.
No, not just to add on a question. Otherwise, we will move.
Okay. Then my question was, I noted down correctly, we need as farmers, because we all talk about farmers and we talk above their heads. And now we have the privilege of having 4 brave farmers in front of us. So I want to be sure I understand what you need in this transitional to regenerative ag. I hear we need coaching of farmers, knowledge. We need measurable benefits to translate it towards the investment space so people can be convinced. What else do you need? So I can be clear about what we need. I've been working with farmers for 20 years in the kingdom of glyphosate, in the middle of the banana plantations. So there's something to say for both. I would really like to take it up outside of the session. But what else do you need? So we can be very clear on that. So we don't let other people decide what farmers need, but let farmers tell us what they need. I'm all ears.
Which is a perfect last round, actually. Let's do that. I had another question, but it doesn't matter. What else do you need? What would be the most catalytic from a group of investors and group of funders? What would make your life on your farm, in your context, very different? You need land, but that's you're moving. You need a farm.
You need a farm.
Anybody
start
out there?
with.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah. No, but I think it's a very important point, and certainly in the Netherlands where it's super expensive. So there are you have the farmers that have already a farm that need to transition. They need to be helped. They also need a financial buffer to make the transition possible, to get the space. But you also have people like me coming into farming from non-farming families that also need access to farms. So that's a very important and crucial point. We need to access to land, access to place. So people can actually farm, and there are beautiful initiatives for that in the Netherlands. It's land to land, but other initiatives are standing up. What we also need is support for the farmers that join forces. So we founded with 65 European farmers EARA, the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, last year, and have a look at that, also to listen to farmers, not talk about farmers, but talk with farmers, find farmers in your countries to have a conversation with them. What do you actually need? I think that's a crucial thing. And one specific thing I would like to say, what we need in the regenerative space is, I've noticed on the beginning of my own journey that a lot of investors put all the risk at the farmers, which is crazy. Like, we need to do all the investments. I've done it myself. I've invested now 4 years in soil and planting trees, and it's my risk. So that's a troublesome point. But also, people didn't want to invest in life. They only wanted to invest in classical capex. So people want to invest in machines, they want to invest in buildings, they want to invest in solar panels. But I kept telling these investors, hey, I don't want a bigger loan and more machines and more infrastructure. No, I want as less infrastructure as I can possibly need to farm regeneratively. And the rest I want to invest in life, in soil, in compost, in microbes, in trees, in people. It's labor intensive in people. It's the best investment we can make. So how can we come up with a system that actually wants to invest in life and doesn't see it as a risk, but actually as the best investment that we can make?
Woo. Okay, we have 3 more to go. Let's keep it brief, otherwise Sarah's going to be annoyed with us. It was amazing, but we're going to...
I'm going to keep it extremely brief. We didn't mention education at all, and I know there's a lot of foundations here today. I think education is so important. Education in farming, regenerative farming, and not only in high school, but middle school. So anything that, any resources that farmers can receive to participate in this education is so important. And then the access to land in Belgium is also, I would say, extremely important because it's extremely expensive.
And education works the other way as well. Having farmers here is amazing, which is possible because of one of the sponsors. So shout out to the Nest, because as already mentioned, we often talk about farmers and have none of them on stage nor in the room when it's full of investors. So if you're on the investing side and you go to these conferences, make sure you bring a few. Pay the ticket, sponsor it, whatever, but make sure they're there. Because they take a few days out of their extremely busy schedule prepping for the season to be here with us. Dimitri.
So I think that generally speaking, because then as I said earlier on, each context will have its own needs, yeah? It needs its own things to unblock a regenerative transition. But generally speaking, we need more examples. In Portugal, for example, there's 2 farmers here from Portugal that have really interesting regenerative farms. And they are having such a big impact in Portugal because they're creating an example for people to see. And farmers believe what they see. And so we need to be creating more examples. We need more farmers like João and like Francisco at the back over there. Again, friends of mine and amazing, incredible regenerative farmers. We need more examples like this because that's what's going to, start to little by little shift the needle.
Fund the examples.
Yeah, just to add to that, this is kind of also what we try to accomplish. The foundation that we built is basically using our 3,000 hectares of land as like a living lab for regenerative agriculture, and we cooperate with the German ministry, with different research institutes, with universities. We have hundreds and hundreds of farmers coming, other visitors coming, and there's so much energy that has come from it, and that these isles of hope, these beacons of hope, and the connection between the farm and science working together and looking at what is possible, what works, what the data is like, what the financials are like, I think that has to multiply around and then sort of connect in the next step. And I think one of the keys and what we desperately need to do is look transparently at the ecological and social values of farming. Just as much as we have to look at the cost of production, the externalized cost of production that today is ignored. Agriculture is by far the most important, the most straight working tool to overcome some of the biggest problems of our time. Climate adaptation, biodiversity, health, rural development, education, equality, all of this is everywhere, at every time, globally, affected by agriculture. Land use is the key. Land use is how we can actually change everything. And once we understand that and we make it tangible because we see the benefits, the true benefits of farming productions, we have the capital and the focus and the science to really overcome it.
And with that, and it can go pretty quickly because I remember visiting in 2019 and was Benedikt and an intern making compost. And that was pretty much it. And with a few brave foundations and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, there's a thriving ecosystem. So it can go pretty quickly once people lean in and step in. So I want to wrap up. Join me in an applause for these brave farmers.